Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, December 1st meeting of the Finance Committee. Pursuant to the Governor's order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 38, Paragraph 20, as well as the Select Board's emergency order dated March 16th, 2020, the Finance Committee will be using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the town's webpage within 24 hours in accordance with the Governor's emergency action requirement of keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask that all participants remotely attending this meeting please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. At this time, I will take a roll call of the attendees. Mr. Alford.
Here.
Ms. Zemer.
Here.
Mr. Whitaker.
Here.
Ms. Nersessian.
Here.
Mr. Maxwell.
Here.
Mr. Murphy.
Here.
I, of course, am here, so we'll get started. I just want to update the committee on a couple of administrative things. Minute-wise, I will be going through a lot of the minutes. I know we're behind a few weeks on the minutes. I'll be taking care of those once we get past town meeting this Saturday. So right now, the plan from a schedule perspective is we're obviously gonna have town meeting on Saturday. My plan right now is not to meet next Tuesday because obviously we will have just had town meeting. But we will begin meeting again on the 15th, and then we'll discuss where we go from there. But the 15th will be the meeting where we start talking about FY22. Travis and I have already started some level of discussion about model parameters, but we're going to try to talk about more, put the framework together on the 15th, so people can we can get started on the FY22 budget process given the delay in town meeting. But minute-wise, I'll also come into the 15th, hopefully with caught up on our minutes. So prepare on the 15th to deal with minutes and to start talking FY22. Okay, but that's it. We'll defer everything for tonight, administrative-wise. There's nothing else to deal with. So second up on our agenda is any update from Travis. So Travis, you want to give us fill us in? Go ahead.
Sure. So last night I didn't get a chance to do some of the CARES Act things that I had lined up. We had two select board members calling in remotely, and I was worried we were going to lose power at any second. It was a little bit of a storm going on. So I put in the email to you today the plan when it comes to unemployment being charged to CARES. $147,583.46 essentially would be, if the select board votes for it, the journal entry that would offset costs through October. That does not include November and December. And so that, if that factors into anything, I just wanted you to have that available. My assumption right now, probably will be that towards the end of December, there's going to be some final cleanup, provided that there is no direction from the federal government or state government saying, any remaining dollars of CARES is free to use for revenue shortfalls. We'll have a plan to spend it down to zero. 147 is obviously a substantial chunk. I also sent you the spreadsheet that Chief Cassidy continues to update as we go forward. If you factor in November and December based on trends, that would be anywhere from about $44,000 to about $60,000 potentially. We are going to have to make an assumption at some point, which is allowed. That was not done last night, but it would have been done if we had had a better situation for the select board. So that is expected to happen probably as soon as next week. The other thing that was voted last night, the select board asked me to bring to them information when it came to licenses. We generally send out the information. It's on a calendar year basis where we send out the information at the end of the calendar year and essentially say, your licenses are due at the end of December. Please get these into us by that point if we'd like us to renew them. So they asked for information specifically for restaurants, but I gave them all the information on licenses. And they took action to reduce by half the licenses for restaurants with full liquor licenses. So that's a $2,500 license. We have 4 of those in town. And the select board voted to reduce those by half. And that is something that we've seen in the area. It's something that cities and towns in the area are doing to obviously reflect the fact that restaurants have had a difficult time, whereas we've had other businesses that were able to open earlier in the phases that were rolled out by the governor. restaurants, sort of got hit the hardest. So that was a decision last night. The impact to FY21 specifically, right? The decision is not into the future; it's specific to 21. Would be $5,000 for those 4 restaurants. And I think that's it for now. Obviously, I can answer any questions as we go forward on CARES, and I can talk big picture if we want, but I'll leave that up to the chair.
Okay. Michelle, you had your hand up.
The unemployment, if you charge it against CARES and then there's an adjustment because of fraud, what happens?
Yeah, so we're going to end up.
What happens to that since you've charged it?
Yeah, so we can identify, and I can sort of go through this a little bit more in detail as we go forward, but we have it broken down, and some of the numbers, we've been reporting as other cities and towns are dealing with the same thing. We're part of a group essentially saying this is a big problem that we need help with. And so we've identified, what are legitimate claims that will have cost to the town, what are fraudulent claims that we'd really like the feds and state to correct. So if we were to get relief from what was done in the first half of the year, it's just going to help us in the second half of the year, especially with what we have lined up in Article 1 for the special town meeting. I don't think we would be reversing enough that we would be in, we would have to fear the fact that we would owe the federal government back for that because of the second half of the year. I mean, we're dealing with the first half of the year at this point, right? And we're planning for the second half with Article 1.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Travis? Because I'll save some of this discussion will bleed into our discussion about the warrant, so I'll save it for later. Okay, then let's move on. I think we have, next is any liaison updates. I don't think there are any because I know we haven't met. I don't think there have been any liaison meetings with town meeting coming up. I will say one thing, which is I still have not heard back from Frank. I'll try one more time to get some feedback from him about, I'll alert him to the fact that we're meeting before town meeting. And just as an administrative note, I did post us for a 12:45 in the field house. So we won't be in the library. As I said, we talked about being in the library, but the select board are going to be there in the interest of social distancing and everything like that. I posted us in the field house, got the clearance with the school department that was okay. So we'll just meet there and stand very far apart or something if we have any business to deal with. But I'll see if I can get in touch with Frank. But so far I haven't heard anything from him. So have you Travis, heard back from Frank?
I never got a response to that email I put you on.
Yeah. So
I can try calling him.
So yeah, if you want to, if you track him down, just tell him we're meeting beforehand and we need to talk to him. Unless obviously, worst case, if we don't hear from him, we go to town meeting and somebody says, "What's our recommendation?" And our answer is going to be, we never got the information. So. Okay. That I don't know if that will matter to something like that, but I'm just saying that's the risk. So, okay. Anybody have anything else under the liaison topic? Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed. Pandemic update, which I guess is somewhat timely because we were just talking about the CARES money. So, Chief Cassidy, are you appropriately dress shirt and tie? There we go. Okay, so, that's right. I think he just sits there for weeks until he starts our meeting. No, just kidding. Go ahead, Chief. You want to give us the update?
Sure. For the 4th week in a row, we remain in the yellow risk category as determined by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. After 2 weeks where our positivity rate was trending slightly downward, last Friday's weekly report did show an increase, and that was for the 14-day reporting period ending the 21st of November. So this does not have any of the spike associated with Thanksgiving travel or additional testing prior to Thanksgiving travel. Today we hit an interesting milestone. We have now had 200 residents who have recovered from the coronavirus, coupled with the 2 COVID-related fatalities early on, and then 27 active cases. We're up to 229 total cases at this time. Wow. Our PPE supply remains robust. We're still in very good supply chain. No issues there. The biggest challenge we have right now is gloves, but we still have sufficient on hand to deal not only with our regular routine medicals, but also obviously with any patients who may be reporting COVID-like symptoms. So we're in good shape in terms of our preparedness and our response capability.
Okay, and one thing I was going to ask you, just related to this, is ambulance-wise, right? Have we seen any impact to our ambulance services? In other words, are we seeing hospitalizations where we're transporting more patients because of COVID? I'm just wondering about that because when you were mentioning gloves, I was thinking about things like sanitizing the ambulances and things like that. If we're seeing needs to use ambulances for COVID patients.
So we actually, the real impact that we saw was back in the March, April into early May timeframe, where, like most other communities around us, our calls for ambulance services were actually down. There was so much publicity about how, the attempt was flatten the curve, try and prevent the hospitals from being overwhelmed, that a lot of people were choosing not to call an ambulance. And then that sort of caught up with everybody. And then people that were then calling were sicker or had more severe cases than they would have had of whatever condition they were in had they not, waited to call. In terms of number of COVID patients that we're transporting, I would say maybe once a month, twice a month if it's a really busy month, are we actually transporting somebody who is positive. There are some people who are exhibiting symptoms and maybe waiting test results, but the majority of our patients, and we're still doing about 100 transports a month, so having one or two who may have a confirmed positive diagnosis. Most people who get the positive diagnosis through testing are able to recover at home and aren't requiring transport to the hospital or long-term hospitalization.
Okay, because as I said, I was just thinking about that in terms of ambulance costs and stuff. Okay, so that's good. So financially, okay.
Yeah, I mean, financially, we're not taking a hit due to reduced volume. I think a lot of it has to do with the switch in who it is that's getting diagnosed now, as opposed to the first surge back in the spring. We've been very fortunate that in the last 6 weeks, no one over the age of 90 has been one of our new cases. This past week, so that's the 14-day reporting period ending the 21st of November, our biggest increases were in the 0 to 9 and the 30 to 39 age ranges. So people who are getting sick are not getting as sick, and they are more resilient to the disease. Unfortunately, that also tends to contribute to them passing it on when they are either asymptomatic or when they have mild symptoms and don't realize that what they have is the virus.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Dan.
So what would it take for us to get to the red? Would it be an average case of 10 per day? Is that what?
No. So we are in the yellow because our average daily count per 100,000 is over 10. So that's what's putting us into the yellow designation right now. But what would get us to the red would be a 5% positivity, as well as the in excess of 10 average daily per 100,000 population.
Okay, so if
for yellow, it's one or the other. But if you then have both factors, it becomes red.
And
so what's our positivity rate then?
2.5, right? Right.
No, our positivity rate for the period ending November 21st was 3.52.
Okay, and what would be the consequences of us going red? Would there be any? Is there anything required of us?
No. If we go red, then that would be a factor that the schools would consider with regards to their instructional model. Mm-hmm. It's not an automatic change, but it is something that would inform their decision-making capability. The biggest issue for us is if we were to go red on Thursday evening, then we would have to postpone town meeting from Saturday.
And why is that? Just what are we would have the red restricts our capacity numbers?
So, no, not it wouldn't restrict the capacity. It's more just out of an abundance of caution. Weeks ago I had been asked, at what positivity rate would you not feel comfortable? And I was on record weeks ago, back when we were in the low 2s, saying that if we got to a positivity rate of 5, then I would not feel comfortable holding the in-person town meeting on that date.
So not judging, but this would be your call, basically, or your recommendation to the board.
Yes, that would be my call, and I would make that recommendation to the moderator based on the public health concern that we would postpone it to time and date certain.
I'm not saying I disagree. I'm just trying to understand what.
Yeah. So again, 5% positivity is the benchmark by which you go from a yellow to a red. It's also the benchmark being used by the Commonwealth when determining the risk of states and territories, and so that has been sort of the consistent standard that's used in public health circles. So again, I made that I drew that line in the sand weeks ago when our situation looked very different locally, and so. That was not made from an emotional standpoint. That was not made from a reactionary standpoint. That was a data-driven, research-based best practices being used by other decision makers. So that's why I feel very comfortable that if we get to that point, it's not going to be a knee-jerk reaction on Thursday, but it's something that was thought about well ahead of time before I would have felt the pressure of, hey, we've already figured out how many microphones we need. We know where the tables are being put. What do you mean you're trying to cancel at the 11th hour? So that's why I feel very comfortable.
Okay. Sue, you have a question?
Yeah, Chief, do you have any concerns about the impact from Thanksgiving and people having not following the governor's recommendations, et cetera, and then being sort of carriers going into town meeting, and just the time lapse between when people tend to get sick?
Sure. I obviously have concerns about the fact that a lot of people traveled. A lot of people did not follow the guidance from public health professionals. With regards to how that directly impacts their potential status as an asymptomatic carrier coming into town meeting, I'm not too concerned. I think most of the people that come to town meeting are fairly conscientious, and we will issue the same reminders ahead of time when we publish the logistics. Again, reminding folks, if you're not feeling well, if you've been around somebody who is suspected or confirmed, don't show up. Watch it online. So I'm not concerned that town meeting would be a super spreader event. My bigger concern is that people would choose to stay away out of fear if our positivity rate continues to climb and our number of new cases continues to climb.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, any other questions for the chief? Okay, thank you, Chief. For the update. Okay, and now we had time to the meat of the meeting, which is anything we need to wrap up for Saturday, provided we don't go above 5%, as the chief just said. But I just wanted to brief everybody on a couple of things, right? At our last meeting, we had heard from the school department about their ballpark number for what their worst case scenario would look like if there was no federal stimulus and they had ongoing run rate things. As a result of that, as we all remember, we made a couple of changes to our recommendations for Article 1 and Article 3. Well, since then, we've gotten a couple of pieces of information. If you recall, our debate on the 17th was about, do we want to touch what's going into stabilization? And we ended up kind of doing this compromise where we took some from unemployment, some from stabilization. Since then, the schools have kind of sharpened their pencils a little bit, and they presented a slightly lower number to the select board and communicated that lower number to me just ahead of this meeting, like literally, just ahead of the meeting. So, so with that, one of the things that I would suggest is we had strived to put away, we had boosted our reserve, the recommendation for the reserve fund by 200,000. The school request came down by about 100,000, which means that we don't have to do the full 200,000 anymore. If you recall, one of the things we had discussed was shifting from unemployment, some from unemployment to the reserve fund and leaving stabilization alone. But the issue was we wanted to shift more than we wanted to take out of unemployment. But with this new information now, we could go back to that plan, which is to take unemployment, for example. What my suggestion would be, and I think that some of you, I know in the last couple of weeks, I've talked individually to a couple of you, and you've heard about this, right? Is we should move to or change our recommendation to take 150 out of the unemployment line, shift that into reserve, so we boost reserves by 150, and then put the 100. Just go back to our original recommendation on the stabilization article, put the full 400 in there. That'll give us 150,000 boost to the reserve fund, which, given that coupled with the lower requirement from the schools, should be sufficient to get us through the rest of the year. So I don't know, do you want to have discussion on that? I mean, I'm just putting that out there, but what do people think about that? Is that a good plan? Mr. Whitaker, you have your hand up.
This may have nothing to do with each other, but this the unemployment funding from the CARES Act, does that play into that at all?
Yes.
Okay, so
yes.
Are we actually back to square one prior to us changing anything, and we still have 100,000, or I'm just kind of curious how it is that 150 plays in from the CARES Act.
Okay. Well, there are two things I'll comment on that. One is that the issue with the 150, right, is, as we discussed last time, you can go one way with it, but not the other, right? We couldn't use the money in unemployment to pay unexpected expenses. We could use the money in the reserve fund to pay unexpected unemployment expenses. That would qualify, right? So in shifting from unemployment to the reserve fund, we're really not changing all that much. We're just giving us more flexibility with the money that's in, by putting it into a fund that has greater use cases, right? But also coupled with that was what Travis had mentioned earlier, and Travis, feel free to chime in if you want to. The use of the CARES money, which is an appropriate use, by the way, this is not some kind of fancy accounting, but the use of the CARES money to cover these unemployment costs does, one of the provisions of the CARES Act is that if you read the Administration and Finance guidance, it says you can't prepay things unless they are things that take place before the 30th. In other words, you can't sit there on December 30th and say, okay, we're going to appropriate 200,000. We have 200,000 enough. We're going to appropriate 200,000 to cover our costs in January and February. It's like, no. It's got to be for things that are incurred prior to the end of the year. So as you heard Travis say, we don't have and won't get the November and December bills till after the year is ended. But because those are incurred, or those expenses are incurred in November, December, we can use the CARES money before December 30th to say we're going to encumber essentially CARES money for these expenses. By doing that, again, the advantage of that is that it hopefully will help us reduce the amount we may need for the rest of the year. Go ahead, Travis, you wanted to chime in on this?
Yeah, no, that's the good point, and what Mark was asking about. So it is what Ken just said, which is moving 150 within Article 1 up from unemployment to the reserve, would leave $100,000 as an adjustment within Article 1, right? Because it was 250. You're talking about taking 150 out of it, so 100. With the original budget of 100, leaves essentially us with a budget of $200,000 for unemployment for the second half of the year. If you look at the worst month that we had for unemployment, it was about $33,000. If you look at that times 6 months, it's going to put you in the $200,000 range. So I think what Ken suggested leaves us in good position for the second half of the year. Then for what Michelle asked about earlier, which is if the feds and state get their act together and we actually have this return, we don't need this $200,000 in the second half of the year, and that money essentially would flow to free cash, but we're protected in the instance of it not being corrected. So, I mean, I think the way that Ken just described it, with taking 150 out of the way Article 1 was originally written, I think works with the math now, especially with the adjustment for CARES.
Yeah. Okay, Vin, you had a comment?
Yeah, so what are we saying for the new?
Okay, so the new recommendation would be, forget about what we've recommended so far. Let's just look at Article 1 as it appears in the warrant, right? Right now it has 250 under unemployment and it has 40,000 in reserve, right? And Article 3 has 884,000 total going into stabilization. Okay? What we would be doing is going back to that Article 3 the way it was. So the 884 would stay there instead of taking 100 out. And all we'd be doing under Article 1 is saying we're going to adjust that table to change the unemployment number to 100,000 instead of 250 and put that 150 up in reserve, so that would be 190 into reserve. So the table would be the same as originally written, except for the line that says reserve fund, which would be 190, and the line that says unemployment, which would say 100. But keep in mind, those are deltas to what was already appropriated. So unemployment would go to a $200,000 budget for the year, and our reserve fund would go to 790, which should be sufficient given the revised number from the schools. So, okay, is that?
Well, I'm okay with this. I still think that, I mean, my vote last week was always sort of under at least my own sort of silent impression that the schools would sharpen their pencils and be able to get the number down, because we were obviously getting a little close to the, if the schools needed all the numbers that they were asking for last week, we would have basically used up the entire reserve fund. And this, we're not all that much different, right? We're 150, 190.
Well, we're actually, in a sense, we left ourselves more margin, right? We're 50,000 higher margin than we were.
We've certainly left ourselves more margin, but we're still have a smaller margin than we normally have in the reserve fund.
Yes, but I want to point this out, right? That was a worst case scenario number from the schools. If
yes,
if
and
you
I'm
ask
just
me, it's like the Six Sigma number, right? Where you think you're really going to end up may not be at that end. You want to prepare for it, but I think the schools and us would be walking into it saying it's very unlikely we end up needing that entire amount, right?
I view it as a 2 or 3 sigma event, but anyway,
okay.
You know, we can argue about that later. I mean, I think we'll be okay. I just want to point out that, you know, we still are leaving ourselves with somewhat less if the schools needed all of the money. And again, what we're trying to do here is bulletproof the budget, just to make sure that anything that does happen, we can account for. But again, I think if it does make it sort of simpler, and it does leave more money in the reserves, and so I'm in favor of making the changes. Plus, you know, we will only having to amend one of the articles rather than 2.
Okay, so I mean, does everybody kind of think that's the good way to go? Because if so, we'll just correct our recommendations, right?
Yep.
So if that's what everybody is looking towards, or that you're in agreement with that approach, then what I would entertain is a motion to reconsider our recommendations for Articles 1 and 3.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, second. Okay. So that's just the motion to reconsider. So as any further discussion on the motion to reconsider? Okay, hearing none, proceed to vote. Mr. Alfred?
Aye.
Mrs. Zemer?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Aye.
Ms. Nersessian?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, so now we'll reconsider. So now the motion for Article 1, and let me just pull it up here. I do have it here just for that reason. The motion we'd want for Article 1, for our recommendation for Article 1, would be that we raise and appropriate the amounts listed in the column FY21 total, with the following exceptions. Reserve fund would be 190,000, and unemployment insurance would be 100,000.
So moved. Or second.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? Okay, let's proceed to a vote. Mr. Alfred?
Yes.
Ms. Zemer?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, and now our recommendation for Article 3 would want to read, let me get that, it would want to read that the Finance Committee recommends that the town appropriate $484,000 from overlay and raise and appropriate $400,000 for the stabilization fund.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion on that? Okay, hearing none, we'll proceed to a vote. Mr. Alfred,
Yes.
Ms. Zemer,
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker,
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian,
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, so there we go. So now we have a completed recommendation for both, and I think everything's in alignment. So we should be good. Now, the only other thing I wanted to mention, so from the warrant perspective, I mean, there's nothing else we need to take care of, Travis, as far as you know, right? We're good to go at this point.
No, I'll try to circulate the motion document that, you know, everybody's accustomed to as early as tomorrow. I think Article 1, you know, especially with just the one change within it, shouldn't be too difficult. And then, yeah, so I'll try to circulate that, and we can just go back and forth and make sure everybody's comfortable leading into Saturday.
Okay, good. Now, the only other thing I want to mention from the committee's standpoint with regards to town meeting is I received an email from Mr. Mayor this morning. He sent it earlier, but had the wrong address, so Travis forwarded it to me this morning about the presentation. His recommendation is that that nobody does presentations at this town meeting for the interest of time, that you have handouts instead. I will tell you, I did spend the weekend preparing a short presentation because I didn't get the email. So, but I wanted to get the committee's opinion on that because I'm fine either way, except that I was thinking of one thing this afternoon after I was thinking about it some more, which is we're going to be encouraging people who are not feeling well or whatever to stay home, and they're not going to be able to get the handout. And I know that our presentations will get posted and so forth. But there was a part of me that says, should we do presentations, but then just severely limit them time-wise, like say it's 10 minutes or something like that, just to give the opportunity to go over the highlights. Ms. Nersessian, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering, is there the flexibility where you could do a video, Ken, and post it to the town website and whoever else would want to do it? And then that way people could watch it before town meeting and then come prepared. Okay.
I have to fire up my webcam video studio here. No,
I don't know if that's allowed, but I just as an option.
Well, I mean, it's allowed in the sense that as long as all 7 of us aren't making the video and we're, that's a non-issue in that sense. Like I could make the recording and circulate it to the committee for review. But yes, I don't think there's any open meeting law question because we're not actually meeting. It's just reviewing the thing. And I could send it out for review ahead of town meeting just to solicit, okay, does this capture, did anybody see any errors? As far as formal approval of, this is our presentation, that could wait till Saturday when we meet again before town meeting, but we could post it in the meantime. There's nothing, that's where Ms. Zemer, and I saw a couple of hands, so we'll go around here. Ms. Zemer, go ahead.
I just want to make sure I wasn't muted. I haven't seen Mary Greendale's show. I just didn't know if you had anything to add to what Travis and John had to say.
I haven't seen Mary Greendale's show either. And to be honest with you, I'm not surprised, but I'm a little dismayed because I would think that if there was a show, a pre-town, like something about town meeting, relevant, I don't know what the show was. If she was doing like a pre-town meeting show, I would have expected that she would have invited one of us at least to be there to talk about the financial recommendations.
Right, because you're usually on it, and I didn't see you there, and then to have you not make a presentation just seems to be a little.
Well, she seemed at the last week's, not this week's, select board meeting, she seemed quite upset that we had dared to have to make a last minute decision and change to things, based upon last minute information that we got. So I'm not surprised we didn't get invited.
Well, as I said, I'm not gonna ascribe any ulterior motive other than to say that I didn't get an invite. So go ahead, Mr. Alfred, you had your hand up.
Right, I just didn't know if you had anything to add to it that would.
Yeah, well, certainly, right. The purpose of the presentation that I do is not to get airtime. It's to give a framework for why we made our recommendations and to give the town an update. Look, we don't have to go into it in depth tonight, but the bottom line with our role, right, is we are essentially, as even the Finance Committee handbook puts it, right, we are the Ways and Means Committee, so to speak, for town meeting, which is the legislative appropriating body, right? So the purpose of our presentation is basically our report out to the people that elect us on how we came to our recommendations and why we're making the recommendations we are, which they should request, because technically we're doing their work for them to make town meeting so that they can make the decisions as to how to spend the town's money. I'm okay either way, but I like, Ms. Nersessian's idea. Maybe that's the way I should go, is record something ahead of time, and then we can put it on the town website. We can, whatever, send out a press release or something saying go there and watch the presentation so that we make town meeting safer. Yes, Mr. Ahern.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. And on the HCAT, I looked back. I did not realize that you felt you should have been invited. I apologize if I could have played a role there. But I think if we had a short video, I think that would be great. Obviously, if the presentation's already done, we can make sure we get that information out to anybody. I did talk to HCAT today when I did a walkthrough of the venue, just to say, presentations, the best way to make sure that they're accessible to people and we can make that happen. I think a video would be great. If you need anything, we can obviously put it on the website, but if you need help getting it done, just let me know.
So, if I might, well, I appreciate, Bill's intent here. The other thing that, as much as the video might help, I would think that a lot of people that are going to attend town meeting might not have had the time to see the video beforehand. And one of the things that usually our presentation does is hopefully it addresses a lot of questions that might come up earlier and actually saves time as we go through it. And, and I would say we are spending quite a significant amount of money.
Yeah,
I recognize that with the situation we want to be expeditious in our in the way we conduct town meeting, but I don't think that a 5 to 10 minute presentation on all of this is that big of a deal. Especially, I think that we should highlight to the taxpayers some of the actions that we're taking to reduce the impact of taxes this year on them, and and then just briefly maybe highlight a few of the bigger ticket items, all the capital that we're spending. I don't know. I understand, but if we're going to be having the meeting, we should do it right, and make sure that that not just the people in that room are informed, but the
other option, Dan, is if I do record something, which now I'll have to figure out how to do that and to do it right. But if I do get something recorded, the other option is I'll know exactly how long it is, right? So I could say to Bill, we have this recording, we'll just play that. Rather than me standing up and talking, we know it's 10 minutes or whatever, and just play the video at town meeting and say, okay, here's the update.
Well, if you want to play it at town meeting, that's fine too. But I'm just saying, I think that the presentation, and both from what the select board say and what we say, just does help to sort of at least frame everything and likely reduce the number of sort of what's the word I'm looking for here? Just sort of like
it's more informative. It provides the background information so that, and this is a discussion I actually had with Travis earlier, where I said, there's part of not about this issue in particular, but when I was talking about the presentation, I said part of the purpose of it is we discovered over the years that by spending 10 minutes or 15 minutes doing the presentation, we save about half an hour or 45 minutes of people asking questions about everything. How did you come up with this? Right? We give them the background to prevent the questions. And I said, and that takes longer because when you have these questions, you have to wait for the person to come up. They have to come all the way up. They have to state their name and address. They have to question. You go back and forth, and you end up adding all this time overhead.
Generally, one question begets 2 or 3 more questions, and
exactly.
Sort of if you stop the flow of any questions, no, let's go to a vote. Once you sort of stop that, and people start thinking more, sometimes it brings up more questions. Not that people shouldn't ask questions if they have them, but
Well, to the extent that they have questions, it can easily be preempted by giving them the information up front, right? That's a good thing. So I just wanted to get general feedback because I was debating, should I respond to Mr. Mayor and say, my suggestion would be, he's the moderator, he can make the determination. But I would, I was kind of going to say something along those lines of, I would hope you'd reconsider. I understand the pandemic, but I've culled down the presentation a lot. I'm going to try to stick on their points, and I think it's important for town meeting to understand what they're voting on.
I think a 5 to 10 minute presentation is warranted, and will save us the time later on in the meeting. So I think that's the main thing to point out to him is that in general, the presentation actually saves time over the course of a meeting.
Okay. Let's see, there were hands up. They're not up anymore. Which reminds me, okay, so related to this, Mr. Hearn, do you want to give us an update on the venue and what the plan is for us?
Yeah, so I was just thinking, I'm going to put up these pictures and then I'm going to feel silly because you obviously all know this building, but it was my first time in the venue. So I'll put up the pictures, but you all know what it looks like, and it's not currently set up. But let me just share the screen.
You have sharing authority, I believe, right? Do you?
I asked Chris for it. So there's Keith sitting in the middle. And so we talked about a couple things. I don't think anything's final. The idea being in the middle will be the moderator and the clerk. Council will probably be behind. I think that worked. At some point, we'd like to move some people up on the stage. I think the question is going to be how many people we can do. I think obviously down in this area, would probably be most of the finance committee. We could try to do some on stage, but that's, I think we'll have to discuss that probably more Friday. We're going to do another walkthrough, and I'll work with Ken. And then so that this is the stage, and so I guess part of the issue too, as we did the walkthrough earlier, knowing that Mr. Mayor had suggested no presentations, we were sort of assuming that not being there. So if you want to follow up with Bill, and so I have more clarity on that, that'll be helpful. Let me just.
So you're saying, there was going to be, so how are we going to deal with debate in general, right?
So we're going to have a lot of microphones. So let me just flip this. If I stop sharing and switch to the other picture, and we had the lights.
Remember last time I had the wireless mic so that I didn't have to use the podium.
We got a lot of wireless mics, so we should be able to wireless mic at least the chair and the vice chair. All right, so this is the other angle, obviously. Sorry, the lights were off. So, up here, can you see my cursor?
Yep.
All right, so right here and probably here would be a mic, down here and down here would probably be a mic. So if you're sitting up here and you need to go to the mic, you're not going all the way down. Obviously, this is going to be pretty sparse when it comes to, every other row, at least, however many seats. Chief Cassidy is going to be actually taping those off physically. And so, I think, we probably won't do the boom mic again with the person who was walking around. I think we will probably have, stations to go to, but there are the wearable mics, that will be for the people, especially the chair of the finance committee, the moderator, the chair of the select board. And then we should have more, actually, even more than we had in July. So, we can work that out, and then have the ability for people to get to the mic without having to travel too far and pass too many people.
Travis,
Yeah.
can I ask a quick question? So this is a closed room, which concerns me, at least for the town meeting we had before, the doors, we had the fans with doors, et cetera. And we had a number of people that weren't wearing masks, candidly, and kept putting them down over their nose, et cetera. And I guess I have concerns about just the space in general. It's a closed room. Do you happen to know like the airflow and how that's all sort of been vetted? I'm sure the chief is comfortable with the space, but certainly just looking, I know the space, but it's concerning because it is interior, and watching going through the last town meeting, people did have their masks down.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to be very vigilant with masks, obviously, and I'll let Chief speak to it more, but we were running sort of the airflow, the units, because more than anything, we want to have them running, but I wanted to make sure people could hear when they are running. So the only problem, it was floated that, stacking people on, 6 feet apart on the stage to get people up and more spread out. The only problem is because the return up there is kind of loud towards the back of the stage, I'm concerned about that. So, there's definitely, and let me just show the picture again. You can see some of the units, and then Chief can jump in as well. But, these up here, there's, where you can't see is sort of the number of these units that's going to be circulating air. certainly we'll be having running, and then the way that the flow of traffic in and out is going to be to come in and then leave through a different exit. And so, I think the amount of air handlers in that room, I was comfortable with when I was in there. But if Chief Cassidy, if there's anything to Sue's question that you had to add.
I think you covered it well. And the exhaust that's above the stage is very loud if you're on the stage. HCAT was comfortable that it wasn't going to be a distraction to the audiobility for broadcast, but we wouldn't want to have several rows of folks on the stage because it would be hard for them to hear, even with speakers on the stage pointing towards members of committees or elected officials. So that's why it would be helpful to have people down front. And with regards to the mask utilization, we will once again remind folks ahead of time. I think we're in a very different situation. I think that back in July, our number of active cases was extremely low. Our total number of cases was very low. We're in a very different situation than we were back in July. So I think that our messaging will be able to remind people of the importance of remaining compliant. And if they can't, then based on the workplace standards, we can have them leave if they can't comply.
I would also point out that that apparently we're okay sending our children to school under this environment. So I guess we should be.
Well, they're not using the auditorium.
Well, I don't know if they're using that room, right?
They're in closer confines than we're going to be. So I think it's
different. It's different, Dan, for kids, so as well, right?
The risk profile is different if you do get it.
And I'm also, candidly, I'm concerned with the talk of the super spread on top of the super spread, right? Or the spike on top of the spike from Thanksgiving, and we're a week out from that, basically. The timing to me.
No, I agree. That's why I'll be wearing an N95 mask, but those super spreader events, generally speaking, are in close quarters and not wearing masks. So
yeah, I know, I definitely get it. But there was non-mask wearing at the last meeting we had, so lots of down over the nose, under the nose. So,
and Louise, you were.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure I have this right. But I did speak with Keith about this as well. I was concerned. I was more concerned that the rows, sort of people have to pass over each other potentially, but I'm sure they'll manage the in and out on that, I guess. But the fan system throughout the high school is running like 24/7, and that's not how it used to be, to the point where it brings in cool air during the night, and so it's flushing the air through the night and the next day, et cetera, and even in the moment. So the air that's in there is not stagnant at any point in time. And we, of course, upgraded filters, et cetera. So I think the airflow system is as good as it could be in there. It's just going to be a question of managing behaviors, and those are the key concerns, and social distancing and all that.
What you're saying is to expect a bigger heating bill.
Yeah.
But the other thing to keep in mind is that the select board did vote to reduce the quorum to 50. So not to say that we don't want people to come, but I'm just saying that we have no idea how many we'll get. I said to Travis, in a non-controversial year in October, we usually barely get 100. So, I'm not even convinced we'll get 50 at a reduced quorum with no controversy. And people dealing with the pandemic, right? So
it would be great to get 55 to 60, so that we are comfortable and don't have too many people. But obviously, anyone who wants to show up absolutely has the right to show up.
Yeah,
and should. But
exactly.
Let's make sure we get a quorum. But other than that, don't feel the need.
I said one other thing. We were working with HCAT too, just to Sue's question, if people are uncomfortable or trying to make sure that, and to Dan's point too, we did have to have some staff members of the clerk, making sure people weren't leaving in July so that we maintained a quorum. So we want to try to avoid that. But, you know, if we keep people in the building, the registered voters, and people want to step outside, I think we're going to be able to have a screen that you could be watching live from outside if you needed to step out of the auditorium. The issue is just making sure that the TV can hook up live to HCAT, because if we stream it through Facebook, it's got like a 30 to 40 second delay. Right. But I think the tech people seem to think it was doable, so that'd be another addition.
I don't think this will take more than an hour and a half. I just don't see that there being.
Yeah, that's why I said I don't see anything controversial here, so I'm hoping it goes quickly. Okay, so any other questions about the town meeting? At this point, our recommendations are done. Our report has been published. As I said, I'll look into the options for the presentation. I will adjust it. The reason I didn't send it out was because I knew we were going to be reconsidering a couple of things, so I didn't want to send out a presentation and have to adjust it. So now that we've adjusted our recommendations and we're going to make no further changes, I'll fix it. It was only 11 slides total, but one is a title slide and 2 are ending slides. So it's really only about eight slides. Go ahead, Travis.
All right. Could you just, if you do want me to print the presentation, could you just try to get it to me Friday morning-ish?
Oh yeah, I'll get it to you before then. I just have to fix it, then send it to the committee for just, you know, oversight. And then once everybody's on board with it, then we'll go from there in terms of getting it out early. I mean, ordinarily I would do this at the pre-meeting because I'd be presenting at a town meeting, but given the circumstances, you know, I'll get kind of just a cursory review by individuals of the committee, and then we'll formally approve it on Saturday. But at least this way we can get it out for the benefit of the taxpayers. Okay, Mr. Whitaker, you got a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry to beat a dead horse, but where do we land on? Are we going to suggest that we do presentations or no presentations?
Well, I'll talk to Bill, and you know, as I said, I think the feedback I'm going to give him is that our preference, and again, correct me if I'm misstating what I heard, but our preference is that to do a presentation if we can, right? A short presentation live if we can, and that to the extent that we can accommodate that, that would be a good thing. Obviously, he's the moderator. He has the right to just shut it down if he wants to. So he may say, I'm not going to allow it, and that's it. But then we'll, you know, I think whether or not he allows it, I'll go do what Sue said, which is I'll try to record it and get it out there earlier. You get it through the outlets or whatever, so people can watch it ahead of time. Because that was really when I first read the email, I was like, you know, it kind of stinks. But then I sat there and I said, you know, the fact of the matter is that last time I got more feedback from people who watched the meeting in July and watched specifically to see the presentation. That was their kind of, you know, they weren't going to be voting because they weren't there, but this was their chance to watch and hear what I had to say about where we were financially. So, you know, I thought about it some more and I said, maybe this is something I want to just mention to Bill. This might be something we might want to consider. I will scale it back dramatically, but I think that if I have 10 minutes, I can do a quick overview and get people aligned on certain things and understanding where our recommendations came from. But, you know, but as I said, ultimately it's up to him as the moderator. So, okay. But if anybody disagrees, say so now before I say something to Bill, and then you guys say that's not what we wanted. But that's certainly the impression I got from everybody was we should do something if we can, and if he chooses not to, we'll try to do it through other means.
It would be unfortunate.
Yeah. Okay. So is there anything else, Travis, from your side that as I said before, you're good? Just give me the thumbs up. You're good for town meeting for us. Okay. So on the committee, is there anything else anybody knows of? Because if not, we can, you know, call it an early meeting today. I would say before I entertain the motion, I just want to make a couple of comments related to what we were talking about earlier, right? For anybody who's watching this meeting, right, town meeting is this Saturday as of now, 1 p.m. It is going to be, you know, by everything on our side, will be every effort to make this go as smoothly as possible and get it over with as quickly as possible. But you know, I'm sure the select board has said the same thing, which is make sure you're following all protocols. You bring a mask. You know, it's important to conduct the town's business, but it's also important to keep everybody safe. So let's try to do both and make sure everybody does their part to make sure we can have a safe and successful town meeting. Okay, that's all I had. So if everybody's good and Travis is good, but he's already said that, I'll entertain the motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Okay, that is not subject to debate, so we'll proceed to a roll call vote. Mr. Alford?
Aye.
Ms. Zemer?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That concludes the Tuesday, December 1st meeting of the Finance Committee. Thank you for joining us tonight. As you just heard, town meeting will be December 5th at 1 p.m. The Finance Committee will be meeting in the high school field house at 12:45, just ahead of town meeting. But for tonight, we're done. So thank you and good night.